Okay, another person who's not had a particularly good week. ABC News chief anchor George Stephanopoulos will not be moderating a Republican presidential debate after acknowledging he gave $75,000 in donations to the Clinton Foundation from 2012 through 2014. Mr. Stephanopoulos, who served as a top advisor to President Bill Clinton, is now apologizing for failing to disclose the contributions, particularly when he grilled the author of a recent book that questioned overlap between foreign donations to Bill Clinton's initiatives and favors by Hillary Clinton's State Department.
But you take it pretty far. You write that the pattern of behavior is troubling enough to warrant further investigation by law enforcement officers.
Correct.
Do you have any evidence that a crime may have been committed?
Certainly, I think it warrants investigation. What that investigation
will criminal investigation?
We'll see. She was the one that was meeting with Lavrov. There were 4 senior congressmen on national security issues that raised concerns about this issue.
But wait a second. There were 9 different agencies that approved it. Doesn't that suggest that that was because there was no national security concern, not because of some nefarious influence on Hillary Clinton? The Clintons do say it's coincidences. They say you've produced no evidence, and I still haven't heard any direct evidence, and you just said you had no evidence that she intervened here. As you know, the Clinton campaign says you haven't produced a shred of evidence that there was any official action as secretary that supported the interests of donors. We've done investigative work here at ABC News, found no proof of any kind of direct action, and an independent government ethics expert, Bill Allison of the Sunline Foundation, wrote this. He said there's no smoking gun, no evidence that she changed a policy based on donations to the foundation. No smoking gun.
Bob Woodward, no smoking gun.
Well, I mean, the question, Dave,
is that George Stephanopoulos smoking gun in this issue?
Well, it sure is aggressive, but in fairness to George Stephanopoulos, he can be tough on the Clintons, and he was in his own book and memoir at the time. The question for Stephanopoulos is, what was going through your mind when you made this donation? Or is there so much money that he's being paid that it's kind of on automatic pilot? But I want to know what he was thinking, because, you know, this is Ethics 101.
Wasn't there a statement out yesterday that said this was just a small percentage of contributions he gave?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a mistake, a big mistake. The interesting thing these days in our culture, can you make a mistake and go on, apologize and go on? You know, is there more to it? Can he explain what was going through his mind? This is not just, you know, buying a cup of coffee.
Yeah, Sam, isn't the transparency really the issue at the end of the day? We had Al Hunt at the beginning talk about, you know, they gave a $250 contribution to the Clinton Foundation for Haiti Relief Fund. You know, I went to my boss and said, hey, I gave some contributions to France and local races. Yeah. The difference is we're not talking about Haiti, and I'm not interviewing the Escambia County Supervisor of Elections.
Although that would make good TV.
That would make great TV. If you knew Dave, you would love him just like I love him. But in this case, you've got him making a contribution to an organization that is at the center of the most important question right now, certainly in the press, facing Hillary Clinton. Well, when he made that clip there, ABC's done an investigation. Is that the biggest problem?
That is the biggest problem. Knowing that he had made those donations, the $75,000 in donations, he obviously should have disclosed when he interviewed this author that he had made those donations. It's just pretty straightforward ethics and journalism stuff right there. I will say this, as you noted, you know, there's lines that each news organization draws when it comes to charitable giving. Now, most news organizations say no when it comes to giving to a presidential campaign or any campaign for that matter. But when it comes to charitable giving, you are allowed in some news organizations to make those donations. You have to disclose. That doesn't mean that you're bought off because you donated to a foundation. I donated to, for instance, Doctors Without Borders. I can report on Ebola.
Hold on a second. I want to play a clip from Jon Stewart, though, because you're talking about charitable organizations and you can make the contribution. George Stephanopoulos himself suggested that people gave to the Clinton Foundation.
Yeah, I saw that. It's pretty bad. Go ahead.
Wanted something more than just a picture. Let's take a look.
I read the book that this is based on, Clinton Cash, read it, and I actually interviewed the author on Sunday. This is a tough one because when you actually look closely at it, he even says there's no evidence of any direct action taken on behalf of the donors. But everybody also knows when those donors give that money and President Clinton or someone, they get a picture with him,
there's a hope that that's going to lead to something, and that's what you have to be careful of.
I don't understand this idea. The entire system appears to be shrouded in that type of quid pro quo or the appearance.
Or you know, even if you don't get an action, what you get is access, and you get the influence that comes with access, and that's got to shape the thinking of politicians. I think that's what's so pernicious about it.
And Caddy, you know, again, I talked about some questions that everybody we talked to yesterday were saying off the air that they weren't going to say on the air. Another thing that I heard from at least a half dozen reporters and media types were that, you know, they were laughing and saying George was doing exactly what people have been questioning foreign leaders about. He was, one prominent person said it was pay to play. He was trying to get in the graces of the Clintons leading into, because Bob talked about All Too Human, a book that put him on the outs with the Clintons for quite some time.
Right, because he's not a foreign leader trying to buy a policy change. So what is it that a journalist might want from the Clintons? You want access, you want an interview, you want to get inside the inner circle in the run-up to a presidential campaign, and exactly what Jeremy Peters said earlier on, this looks like he was giving money. Even if this had nothing to do with it, there is the perception.
And what's head-scratching is there's charities that he wants to support. AIDS charities, deforestation are the ones he mentioned. There are other charities without the Clinton name associated to it that he could have given to prevent all this from taking place.
Other charities, quite frankly, that people like Jeffrey Sachs, who knows a thing or two about charities, are much, much more efficient in providing the type of relief that we're talking about here.
And when you give to any organization, any individual, you need to have a Mother Teresa test. In other words, is this pure? And be really, really careful. And he wasn't careful, and I think he should also be given a chance to say, hey, look, this is what was going through my head. I don't think $75,000 is going to buy much with the Clintons, maybe a 4-minute speech by Bill.
Okay, we'll be remiss in not hearing what George himself has to say. In a statement, Stephanopoulos writes in part, quote, "In hindsight, I should have taken the extra step of personally disclosing my donations to my employer and to the viewers on air during the recent news stories about the foundation. I apologize." ABC News, for its part, is backing Stephanopoulos, writing in, quote,